Welcome. Welcome to Grace University Lutheran Church and this celebratory worship service that marks 100 years of place. Thanks be to God. A special welcome to all who are guests today. Thank you for coming on this warm Sunday afternoon. Please stand as you are able. Let us pray. God of all goodness, whom the heavens cannot contain, we give you thanks for the gift of those who built this house of prayer 100 years ago to your glory. We praise you for this community and our partners in ministry, who by their use continue to make it a sacred place and people. And we pray that all who seek you here may find you and be filled with your joy and peace and a hunger and thirst for your justice in the world. Amen. the loving, Spirit-breathing God with us be with you all.
And also with you.
You may be seated. I'd like to invite Andrew to come forward.
We praise you, O God, for the joy we find within the community of faith, for communion with one another, for the sharing of blessing and burden, for welcome and sending, for nurturing one generation to the next, for expressions of holiness made visible in our midst.
The vision that landed at this corner of Harvard and Delaware Streets 100 years ago. The laborers of the past whose memories we carry in our hearts. The committed service of today's leaders, members, and guests who embody your presence.
Let no talent be overlooked in the building of your reign, and let us never fail to acknowledge each offering made to this, your church.
Fill us with your Spirit this Pentecost. Let us be builders of a holy place where we may find peace in the face of turmoil, yet not a place where complacency finds a home. Let us be servants and visionaries both, planters and harvesters each, stewards of a living treasure.
God of welcome. We pray for students, hospital staff, researchers, social workers, hospital patients and their loved ones, business persons, hotel workers, those who seek peace in the Grace Garden, those seeking healing and comfort. Keep us ever mindful of our mission to be a people and a place of reconciliation.
And may both body and spirit be nurtured and strengthened.
Bless the door that all who enter this place may find kindness and understanding, a sign of God's love made visible. May the doors be opened wide to receive stranger and friend, sick and septic, those in need and those who are not aware of their needs. Bless the coming in and bless going out from these doors, and bless these walls and space soaked with prayers and your device and beautiful humanity.
Desire that we love others as we have first been loved. Amen.
chapter 8, beginning at the 22nd verse. Then Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord in the presence of all the assembly of Israel, and spread out his hands to heaven. He said, O Lord God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth beneath, keeping covenant and steadfast love for your servants who walk before you with all their heart. The covenant that you kept for your servant, my father David, as you declared to him, you promised with your mouth and have this day fulfilled with your hand. But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Even heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you, much less this house that I have built. Regard your servant's prayer and plea. O Lord my God, heeding the cry and the prayer that your servant prays to you today, that your eyes may be open night and day toward this house, the place of which you said, my name shall be there, that you may heed the prayer that your servant prays toward this place. Hear the plea of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray toward this place. O hear in heaven your dwelling place, heed and forgive. Likewise, when a stranger who is not of your people Israel comes from a distant land because of your name, for they shall hear of your great name, your mighty hand and your outstretched arm. When a foreigner comes and prays toward this house, then hear in heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all that the foreigner calls to you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, and so that they may know that your name has been invoked on this house that I have built.
O Lord of hosts, happy are they who put their trust in you. How dear to me is your dwelling, O Lord of hosts.
My soul has a desire and longing for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh rejoice in the living God.
Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest, where she may lay her young, by the side of your altars. O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Happy are they who dwell in your house. They will always be praising you. Happy are the people whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on the pilgrim's way.
Those who go through the Balmas Valley will find it a place of springs, for the ambulance have covered it with the pools of water.
They will climb from height to height, and the God of gods will be seen in Zion. Lord God of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob.
Behold our defender, O God, and look upon the face of your anointed.
For one day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather stand at the threshold of the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked.
For the Lord God is both sun and shield, bestowing grace and glory. No good thing will the Lord withhold from those who walk with integrity.
O Lord of hosts, happy are they put their trust in you. How dear to me is your dwelling, O Lord of hosts.
A reading from the prophet Ezekiel. Then my guide brought me back to the entrance of the temple. There water was flowing from below the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. And the water was flowing down from below the south end of the threshold of the temple south of the altar. Then he brought me out by way of the north gate and led me around the outside to the outer gate that faces toward the east. And the water was coming out from the south side. Going on eastward with a cord in his hand, he measured 1,000 cubits and then led me through the water. It was ankle deep. Again he measured 1,000 and led me through the water. It was knee deep. Again he measured 1,000 and led me through the water. It was up to my waist. Again he measured 1,000, and it was a river that I could not cross, for the water had risen. It was deep enough to swim in, a river that could not be crossed. He said to me, "Mortal, have you seen this?" Then he led me back along the bank of the river, As I came back, I saw on the bank of the river a great many trees on the one side and on the other. He said to me, "This water flows down toward the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah. And when it enters the sea of stagnant waters, the water will become fresh. Wherever the river goes, every living creature that swarms will live, and there will be very many fish once these waters reach there. It will become fresh, and everything will live where the river goes. People will stand fishing beside the sea from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim. It will be a place for spreading nets. Its fish will be of great many kinds, like the fish of the great sea. But its swamps and marshes will not become fresh. They are to be left for salt. On the banks on both sides of the rivers, there will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, nor their fruit fail, but they will bear fresh fruit every month, because the water flows from the sanctuary. Their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
It's still Pentecost, and there couldn't be a better day for celebrating the 100th birthday of this church building on the day that we celebrate what we often call the birthday of the whole church. We've turned to a rather obscure lesson. How many of you are familiar with Ezekiel 47? Well, it's a wondrous text. This vision of the water flowing out under the door of the temple. And Ezekiel wades through this water, and as he wades through it, he measured out 1,000 cubits, and it grows deeper and deeper. And every time I read this text, I think of a song we used to sing at camp. And I won't sing the whole thing, but it goes, oh no, it's up to my toe, it's up to my toe. Oh me, oh gee, it's up to my knee. Oh my, it's up to my thigh. Oh, stop there. But it's a rather kind of funny vision, but it didn't come at a funny time. Ezekiel received this vision when the people of Israel were in exile in Babylon. Jerusalem itself had been destroyed. There wasn't any temple, and there wasn't any temple door. But God gave the prophet this vision of what the temple could be if they could see that water was flowing out the door of the temple. went, everything that was stagnant and dead would come to life. There would be very many fish, like the fish of the great sea. And on the banks of the river there would be many trees. And the trees would grow fruit for food and leaves for healing. And that wondrous promise, everything will live where the river goes. Everything will live where the river goes because the water is flowing out the door of the temple. Everything will live where the river goes. Oh, it is a wondrous vision for the whole church, but surely for this Grace Church on the corner of Harvard and Delaware, squeezed between a parking ramp and the dorms and the hospital in the midst of this great university. It was years before Ezekiel had this vision that Solomon prayed at the dedication of the temple that would later be destroyed. And he seems to be rather ambivalent about whether he should even have built this building. He says, but will God indeed dwell on the earth? Even heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you, much less this house that I have built. And yet he did pray. He prayed that all the people who would bring their prayers into this place would be blessed. He prayed for the prayers of the people of Israel. But surprisingly, he also prays that the prayers of every foreigner who came into that place would be heard by God. This is what Hilvey picked up in one verse of that wonderful hymn. Now as the years move on, new creeds and cultures come. They share their faith and needs with us, wherever they are from. So many prayers here. Prayers of the Muslim students who pray here every Friday. Prayers of Coptic Christians. Imagine the Coptic church so under attack, in Egypt especially. Prayers of Episcopal students. Prayers written, scribbled on pieces of paper in the garden, maybe by people who don't even like religion. Pastor Mary often talks about these prayer-soaked walls, and now you see they're covered with these red prayers that we wrote today and some of the children wrote before. It doesn't mean that there are cracks there that need to be repaired. But these prayers that are gathered up here, imagine 100 years ago, on May 27th, 1917, the first service in this sanctuary, 1 month after the United States entered World War I. What were those prayers like? Prayers through the Great Depression. Prayers through too many wars. Prayers for the people who went off to war. And prayers for the people who opposed the wars, including some of Grace's pastors. Students praying in times of stress. Visitors from far away that we may not even know their names, praying here for loved ones in the hospital. Silent prayers, tearful prayers, and sometimes prayers of thanksgiving. If you haven't read the history book, I hope you will read it very soon. The beautiful history book that was put together by members of this church. It tells so many things that I will not repeat here now, but you know probably that Swedes built this church, and I just have to say that out of a sense of pride. They built this church after two churches joined together, Sharon Lutheran Church, people that spoke Swedish, joined with Grace English Lutheran Church. Get it? They spoke English. They came together to build this church. And from the start, they saw themselves as a people moving out, flowing out under these doors, especially to the university. In the history book, there's a little copy of a letterhead. I don't know if it was a fundraising letter, maybe, but it said, this is how they described the future church in 1916. It's across the street from Minnesota College, 1 block from the university campus. Proposed edifice to cost $30,000. From the start, they saw the university as their mission field. C.A. Wendell, the first pastor, and members of the church at that time, they saw themselves flowing out the doors to reach the lives of students and to invite those students in. But the university could have swallowed us up. I love the story about Elmer Anderson. I hope you've read it. If you haven't, I'm going to tell you right now that Elmer Anderson was a former governor of Minnesota, and he was a member of Grace when he was at the university. And Mary told me that he met his wife, Eleanor, in the old church kitchen, and they were married here. Well, by the grace of the Spirit, Elmer Anderson was on the Board of Regents in the 1970s when the university laid out a master plan. Can you see them all gathered at the table? They're looking at this master plan. It's in great detail, with architect's precision. And he looked at that map and he said, "Where's the church?" Well, they said to him, "We plan to buy the church and tear it down." "Oh, Ufta," he would have said if he was Norwegian. We don't know exactly what he said, but he said, "Oh no, put that church back on the map. That church is staying." And so it did. And here we are. What a wondrous gift of the Spirit that Elmer Anderson, Board of Regents member, former governor, probably people listened to him. At that very moment, he was able to say, "This church stays." And what a visionary thing it was for the Augustana Church, for the Synod and this conference to choose this particular corner. Before there were dorms, before there was Moose Tower, before we were surrounded by the university, they chose this particular corner to build Grace Church. It would be impossible now to even propose to build a church in the middle of the campus. But here we are. What a wondrous gift from those people of vision. Oh, we love this building. I was looking around again today and I thought how wonderful it is. There's a kind of roughness to the bricks here. And there's no pictures in the windows. There's not a white Jesus. There's not lots of pictures of male disciples. They're plain. And we bring to these windows what we imagine. Things that we see, who God is to us. We can let our imaginations roam in this sanctuary. And if you go outside and you look at this church, you cannot even tell that there's a new addition. Right? So carefully did they match the bricks and the mortar that you can't even tell where one starts and the other begins. It was wonderful that they built this addition, and the whole reason they built this addition really was to make it accessible so that people could flow in the doors and flow out again, no matter how their walking happened to be. And I love watching it because the ramp that we have built for walkers and wheelchairs, it's a great place for kids to run up and down. And the elevator built so that people could worship upstairs and eat downstairs. So have we come to worship a building? Is this building important because it's on the National Register? Is this all about memory and nostalgia? want us to remember this day that this church, this building is sacramental. I don't mean it's a sacrament. Lutherans teach that we have two sacraments, baptism and the Lord's Supper, and when Martin Luther was talking about the real presence in the sacrament, he didn't say that bread and wine became something else, but he did pound on the table and said, "This is my body." He said God is everywhere. God is in a grain of sand, but sometimes we forget that God is anywhere at all. And so we taste, we touch at communion. And when we come into this building, we touch these stones. We touch one another at the passing of the peace. And when we leave here, when we forget that God is anywhere, we remember that this place helped us sense the presence of God. Did you hear it in Brian's anthem? This sacred space, this sanctuary, whose rough-hewn beams carrying the weight of the world as we wait for the word to spread like fire emblazoned on our hearts. This sacred space is sacramental. In her book, Traveling Mercies, Anne Lamott shared a story that her pastor told her. This is from a time that her pastor was about 7 years old, and a little friend of hers got lost. And I imagine her little friend was probably about 7 years old too, and she walked and walked around this big town where they lived, and she looked for anything that looked familiar. There was nothing, no landmark, nothing looked familiar, and finally she just stood still, absolutely still, and she began to cry. And a friendly policeman came by and asked her what was wrong, and she told him she was lost and she didn't know where to go, and he said, "Well, come into the car and we'll drive around." And they drove around and around and around, and finally she saw her church. And she said firmly to the policeman, "You can let me out now. This is my church, and I can always find my way home from here." Oh, we hope our children will say that no matter where they go. But not only our children, I mean all of us, often confused, terrified at the news of the day, worrying about our health, worrying about our children, uncertain about the future, that we have this sense, this sacramental sense, this is my church, and I can always find my way home. Once we've been found by grace at Grace, then we have the courage to flow out under these doors. And when we do that, the promise is that everything will live where the river goes. Mary said it this morning, quoting Krister Stendahl, "The church is not a monument, it is a river." And what a mighty river it is. And you know, I haven't been here long enough to know everybody in this congregation or where you go, but at least let me name some places. We're flowing into classrooms, homes, courtrooms, computer labs, hospitals, clinics, legislature, nonprofits, prisons, counseling centers, dental office, and onto planes. We're caring for elders, caring for children, caring for insects, caring for chimpanzees. We go to research labs, homeless shelters, boardrooms, National Guard. We're urban planners. We go to deathbeds. We're flowing into difficult places, lonely places, caring for an elderly parent, caring for children. We protest, flowing out of these doors. We protest through Isaiah. We go to Black Lives Matter marches. We share iftar meals with our Muslim neighbors. We have flowed out this door to Tanzania. and the Democratic Republic of Congo. We are a river of photographers, engineers, weavers, farmers, potters, economists, musicians of all types, and retired people who literally do 1,000 hours of volunteer work every year. I know I haven't named all of you. I hope you'll put your name in that river. Most of all, I hope that you will remember the great promise given to the prophet. Everything will live where the river goes. Everything will live where the river goes. So, believe the vision. See the river. Be the river. Everything will live where the river goes. So may it be.
where time began. We give you thanks for the vast variety of cultures and language that enrich our lives and world. Teach us to value these differences even as we work toward greater unity, justice, and peace. God, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Enlivening Spirit, blow into our midst and throughout creation, that we and all living things might be filled with your divine word and with power. Teach us to use that power to flow out beneath these doors, to do your renewing, restorative work. Make us faithful witnesses of your grace and love. Continue to guide and empower this community of faith in this place for the next 100 years. As we face change and challenges, may your grace endure in all we do and in all we are. We give thanks for all the saints who supported this ministry and upon whose generosity and vision we stand. God, in your mercy, hear our prayer. We give you thanks for this place, for these prayer-soaked walls, and all who find welcome, solace, and challenge to be your followers. Bless all who use this space for their ministry, Lutheran campus ministry, University Episcopal community, Muslim Student Association, Coptic Christian community. We give thanks for the wider church, our synod and its leaders, and our congregational friends. God, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Gracious God, we are thankful you hear our prayers that cover these prayer-soaked walls. Into your hands we commend all for whom we pray, trusting in your mercy. Through Jesus Christ. Amen.
Blessed be our hands that have touched life.
Blessed be our hands that have nurtured creativity.
Blessed be our hands that have held pain.
Blessed be our hands that embrace with love.
Blessed be our hands that tended gardens.
Blessed be our hands that have closed in anger.
Blessed be our hands that have planted new seeds. Blessed be our hands that have cleaned, washed, mopped, and scrubbed.
Blessed be our hands that are wrinkled and scarred from doing justice.
Blessed be our hands that have been reached out and been received.
Together. Blessed be our hands that hold the promise of the future. Blessed be the works of your hands, O holy ones. We stand for the sending hymn. May Christ give hope to your dreaming, and may the Holy Spirit, your advocate and supporter, set your hearts ablaze with the passion of peace. Amen. You may be seated.